Man, I've done hundreds of weddings in my ministry career. And you've heard those words that are said at almost every wedding, the vows that are exchanged. Do you, groom, take this bride to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise before God and these witnesses that you will love her, cherish her, and be to her a true and devoted husband, true to her in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, in prosperity and in adversity, and that forsaking all others, you will keep yourself to her and to her only, as long as you both shall live? Man, we've heard those words, those promises that people make with one another at a wedding, but are those just really words that we're saying, or are they promises that we're keeping? In tonight's episode, you're going to meet a couple who knows something about what it's like to fight for love, for better or for worse. Tonight, you're going to be challenged to fight for your family. But before we get too far, I wanted to start off with this question. What does the word commitment mean to you? Or maybe answer this. What does the word love mean to you in the context of marriage? How have you seen that demonstrated in your household, or maybe with a couple that you know living around you? Why don't you go ahead and start off with that question tonight? Meet Jared and Lexi, a happily married couple attending and serving at CCV Surprise Campus. But things aren't always as they appear. You can't always judge a book by its cover. You see, when they met, Jared was a firefighter dealing with anger issues, and Lexi was a recovering alcoholic. Let's listen to their story.
I'm Lexi Weimer.
And I'm Jared Weimer.
And we're fighters. A good friend of mine that I'd known for about 5 years introduced Jared and I. We just seemed to hit it off.
She saw how I was with my son, and she was like, wow, that's really cool, you know? And then her daughter, Ella, you know, took to me really quick, and, you know, and so we started dating.
We got along great. I mean, we get along great. We have a lot in common.
We're both, you know, strong-willed, determined people, and so we, you know, I carried over into our relationship, you know.
When we were first together, we started experiencing some problems with Jared's anger.
I remember calling a guy I work with, and he, you know, he just was like, hey man, when are you gonna grow up? And I was like, what do you mean by grow up? Are you ready to give your life over to Christ?
I wasn't very into church at that time. I was raised in a very metaphysical background where we were taught that we are God. And so I really didn't, I thought that was great for him. If that was going to help with his anger problem, you know, go to church, do whatever you need to do. But I still wasn't convinced that Christ was the only way.
You know, she didn't really agree with church, didn't really understand it.
You know, marriage was, it was definitely spontaneous. He proposed to me in November, and we got married on New Year's Eve by a radio station, a local radio station.
And then we moved, you know, just moved her out of her apartment into mine, and next thing you know, we're a family.
We definitely had some struggles in the beginning. About 6 months into our marriage, my daughter, she has alopecia universalis, so she's lost all her hair completely. And we also found out that we were pregnant. So there was a lot of stress in the first year, and there was a lot of difficulties because I was still in that metaphysical, I'm God kind of thing, and he was into Christianity, and I was already thinking divorce in the first probably 8 months before I even had our child.
Was it, yeah, December 25th, you know, we had our baby. You know, we get home with the baby, and, you know, now we celebrated our first anniversary. We're just like, wow, this year's gone by fast, you know? Okay, let's slow down a little bit.
Jared started working again, and he had taken off some time to be home with the baby and me, and I told him I was okay. I thought that I could handle this, and one day she was crying, and I had gone downstairs and grabbed a glass of wine just so I could deal with her crying, and so I could go back upstairs and change her diaper. That was really what it came down to. It wasn't even a second thought. That was the only way I knew how to cope with life. My only option to get some peace and some serenity in my head was to drink. Once it's in your system, it's game on. And it was game on no matter how much I prayed, no matter how much I said I wasn't going to do it again. I would lie to Jared, and I would tell him that I was just going to go to the bank, and I would stop at Walgreens just to go grab a 4-pack of wine that I needed to down right then and there. It got to a point where I was blacking out. Jared had never seen me that way. He married me sober.
When, you know, this relapse happened after she was sober for 4.5 years, there was no question in my mind that, you know, there was no doubt I wasn't going to leave, that I'm standing by her.
I do remember that it had escalated so much from the last time that I had gotten sober that I don't remember a thing. I was blackout drunk, and that was never anything that I had experienced before. I vaguely remember being on the floor. I was passed out, drunk, and my stepson grabbed my arm I felt my arm grab and him drop it. It just dropped to the floor because I was so passed out drunk. And he asked what was wrong with Mommy. And Jared just said, she's sick. She's really sick. And you would think that would be enough to hear your stepson say, she's sick. And I crawled up the stairs to go find more wine. I didn't care about anybody else anymore. And I didn't care about living or not living. And luckily, I've met a lot of people that did care and said that I needed help. I have a friend who's been sober for about 13 years and runs a treatment center. And he had some connections, and this place had been full, and they had a bed open up that day.
Some of the things I thought when wife was leaving to go to rehab, you know, one was fear. You know, yeah, I'll admit it, man, I was scared. Fear of the unknown. You know she's become a changed person, and then you think, is she still gonna like me for me? Is she gonna change so much that what she fell in love with, she's not gonna be attracted to anymore?
The addict and the alcoholic has a big ego, and they think that they are God. And based on my metaphysical background, I thought I ran the show. And I forgot that God ran the show. The place that I went to rehab at, they make sure to break down your ego so that you find a power greater than yourself that you can depend on. And unfortunately, they did a lot of damage in the sense of you're a bad mother, you're a bad wife, look what you did to your kids.
They were very adamant about her, you know, doing sober living another 3 months away from us.
And I couldn't be away from my husband and my kids any longer. So I told them no, and they kicked me out. They took all my stuff and put it in trash bags and sent me back to Phoenix.
When she came home, I was excited. You know, I felt, wow, it's a homecoming, she's coming home.
And as soon as I got home, I was overwhelmed. And I was overwhelmed with what Jared had been doing for 4 months. He was playing mom and dad. And with 3 kids, it's not easy to do it with 2 parents.
Coming home, you know, even if it was a long shift or a rough shift, if I saw things, you know, traumas and things of that nature, being able to take that hat off and put dad hat on right away. And, you know, and I had to really lean in on God in that.
I was overwhelmed when I got home, to say the least, that everything was intact. The kids were doing well, and our new baby and him had bonded so well. And I started feeling sorry for myself. You know, I didn't feel appreciated. I wasn't needed. And I started having a lot of anxiety.
You know, she was a little scared at first because she's just like, I'm at home now. And this is, you know, those memories of how she was drunk at our home are flooding back. The next day we get the baby, and the baby's overwhelming. You know, and so now she's trying to, okay, maintain sobriety as well as be mommy again. Because, you know, she's got kids that missed her, you know, and be a wife.
I was very jealous of Jared's relationship with our new baby. I've been gone almost half her life, and I wasn't sure that I could handle it anymore. You know, I was having anxiety about even changing her diaper. I would start shaking and crying, and I didn't know what was wrong with me.
And then she was on antidepressants, and so she didn't feel like she was truly sober because she was having to take these things. And so that started messing with her. And, you know, and then a couple months after that, I should have caught it. You know, I heard, I just want to feel different. I just want to feel different.
I knew that the only thing that was my cure was still alcohol, because if I was still thought I was God, you know, and I'm not doing a good job, then I guess alcohol would do a better job.
You know, she's like, I just need to go for a drive. And I remember looking at her, I was just like, I don't want to give you the keys. She's like, why? I'm like, because you're going to go drink. She's like, no, I'm not. I was like, you're gonna go drink. And she's like, and then I finally said, well, I have to trust you and I gotta trust God. And then she left, and then an hour later I get the phone call, she's sitting in the parking lot drinking wine. Yeah, it hurt. And I was angry at God. I was mad because I'm sitting here, God, you're telling me I have to trust you, and this is what is handed to me now? What's the deal?
I came home one night and told Jared that I was very appreciative of everything he did, that he is the love of my life, but I want to run my car into the back of an 18-wheeler or run a red light. And because that powerlessness had come back, and the craving had come back for alcohol, and the self-pity, and I didn't have a God of my understanding. I didn't have anything to keep me in check with God. I told Jared in the morning that I have no options anymore. God's my only choice, or I'm gonna die.
And when she asked me, she's like, so what do you really mean you give your life over to Christ? What's that? She goes, what's that like? And I told her the way our past was and the way we were, it's just taken away from you. It doesn't matter anymore. It's been erased. And she's like, really? I was like, yeah.
At that moment, he said, do you mind if I call a pastor friend? And the guy just happened to be 2 blocks down the street.
It's just kind of a God thing. He was a mile down the road from us, and so he stopped on by and he, sat down with us with a cup of coffee and just started talking to her.
And at that moment, I accepted Christ. Repented of my sins. There was a new excitement in the house. I actually felt different, that something had touched me enough, and I knew I wasn't God anymore. I started coming to church. Jared and I started reading scripture in the morning, and then I got baptized, and there was something that changed that night that I got baptized. I felt that all the guilt and the shame of not being a perfect mom, or not being able to battle this addiction effectively, and having gone back out and using, and was all gone. That the only person I needed to please was Jesus and God. And there was a big weight lifted off of me. Right before we got married, we had some Christian friends tell us to go to CCV and get some marriage counseling. Make sure you know what you're doing before you get married. And I remember the lady put a triangle on the piece of paper, and she said, marriage is like the top of the pinnacle. And she said, and you two are at the base of here. And as long as you keep seeking your relationship with God, you will always meet at the top. And that's what Jared and I have to do. We get off track every once in a while, and there's arguments every once in a while, but we know that when we do get off track, that it's putting Jesus and God first, so we can be at that pinnacle together with him.
It's too easy to quit. People don't become champions without hard work. You don't have a great marriage without hard work. When God's in your corner, man, when God's for you, who can be against you?
The media puts divorce as something people do every day, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be that we fight for marriage, not that it's something that it's just an option when we want out or things aren't going our way. You have to fight for it, and you have to realize that life isn't perfect, and there's going to be obstacles.
We're being told constantly of the world that you're supposed to be happy all the time, and you're never supposed to have issues, you're never supposed to have problems, and it's not how it is. God's even showed us that, hey, we're going to have trials. Without that relapse, without having to go through that, it wouldn't have made me a stronger father, it made me a stronger husband. That's also what led her to give her life over to Christ. Yeah, at the time, I couldn't comprehend it. I felt very hurt and very angry at God. But looking back now, I can see that that was a blessing there.
Even though he looks like that tough firefighter guy that nobody would want to mess with, but he's really a romantic at heart, and he believes in true love, and so do I, and I'm very lucky and blessed to have him in my life and to be the father of my children.
And I'm extremely proud of her, extremely honored to be her husband. and honored that she's my wife. The woman that she's becoming, the wife she is, the mother she is. You know, I've never loved anyone more like that in my life before.
Man, that's an incredible story. How Jared and Lexi battled, and they're both heroes. Lexi was able to fight back the things that had been tempting her for so long, and Jared was able to fight for his marriage. You know, we find a lot of different ways that we can gain inspiration. Why don't you just talk about something that you felt was inspirational from what you heard today? You know, understanding what love and commitment is really all about, trying to navigate this adventure called marriage, is nothing new. I know we're wrestling with it today, but the people back in Jesus' time, they did too. That's why when Paul wrote the book of Ephesians, he was writing to the believers in Ephesus, and they were wrestling with the same concept, the same ideas going on. And so he had some great insight in that book that we're going to study together this evening. So what I'd like for you to do right now is to read this text together in your groups. In Ephesians, the later part of chapter 5, up through the first part of chapter 6. Why don't you go ahead and read that text and then press play when you're ready to continue. Now, depending on what version you read, there's a couple of phrases that always get a lot of airplay. And one of them is this: husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The other one that gets a lot of commentary is when it says, wives, submit to your husbands. Now, let me back up real quick and I'll capture both of these. First, when it talks about husbands following Christ, just like Christ gave himself up for the church, guys, that's talking about sacrifice. That means as men, we are the spiritual leaders of our house, and our job is to sacrifice ourselves for our family. That means we do whatever it takes to make sure that that love is preserved, to make sure that God is the center of our marriage and of our household, and to make sure that we are sacrificing ourselves for our families. That is a lofty calling. Ladies, when it says submit to your husbands, I'll admit I have taken that out of context. There have been times earlier on in my marriage where I've said that mistakenly to my wife and she's called me on it. You know, we've since rebounded and rebuilt, but here's what that statement means. If your husband is truly following after Christ, what wife wouldn't want to serve her husband because of it? That's where this whole idea of submission comes from. If he's following after God, wouldn't you want to serve your husband if he is being the leader that God has called him to be? I guess here's the point. In God's ideal marriage, the husband and the wife exist to outserve each other as they follow Jesus Christ. Man, that would be a perfect union. That's what love and commitment are all about. So what I'd like to do right now is just ask this question and give this for you to discuss. How do you keep Jesus Christ at the center of your family? How do you keep him in the center of your marriage? And how do you bring your kids along for the ride? And talk about the dangers that exist when this cycle of service breaks down. You see, marriage is a covenant, and a covenant isn't to be taken lightly because that's usually mentioned in a relationship agreement between two parties. And that basically stipulates that when one party falls short, the other one makes up the difference. Well, that's used in our relationship agreement between God and man. When we fail, Jesus Christ makes up the difference. In fact, that contract is sealed in his blood. Same thing that's mentioned when it comes to marriage. Listen, none of us are going to be perfect. But when one party falls short in the perfect marriage, the other one fights to make up the difference. We saw that with Jared and Lexi, and that's what commitment in marriage is all about. So we'd like you to answer this question. How have you seen this covenant relationship exist in your family and in your marriage? Now, I understand that by sharing this question, what you're basically saying is, listen, we realize that nobody is perfect, that when one of us falls short, here's how we've made up the difference. We realize that when you answer this question, it's going to be revealing some things because I can't answer that question about my wife and she can't answer that about me unless we reveal where we've messed up, where we might have not done our best jobs. So I would just encourage you, let's be sensitive to that issue as we share, but let's be honest. Jared and Lexi have been really courageous in where they've taken us in their story. Let's be courageous as we give our answers to this next question. Well, we hope you've been inspired as you've listened to the story of Jared and Lexi. Here is our takeaway. We want you this week to fight for your family. There's a couple different ways that you can do that, especially based on what we've heard tonight. You can do this by protecting your family and by guarding the priorities of your family. Here's what I mean. In tonight's story, you heard how Lexi, for example, she had to deal with a very real distraction and a very real interruption or temptation in her life. She knew that there was no way she could beat this disease of alcoholism on her own. In fact, it's interesting that only after she gave her life to Jesus Christ did she finally make a comeback. I know that our interruptions, our distractions that are plaguing our family units may not be something that drastic. But you know what? We need to take those steps to do whatever it takes to protect our families. Maybe what that means for you, that might mean just blocking out a night that you're going to try to have dinner together around the table. Man, how long has it been since you've done that? Maybe it means just eliminating a night where you're on media. You know, if you're watching TV, some people are online, some people are on their cell phones. It's been a long time since maybe your family's just gathered in the living room to have a simple family discussion. Those are some of the ways that you can protect your family. You remember what Lexi went through? Friends, it's those interruptions or distractions that can be potentially deadly to your families. What can you do to protect your families this week? Secondly, how can you guard against the priorities you need to keep as a household? Jared and Lexi found Jesus Christ, and that's helped their marriage tremendously. Now they're serving, they're attending church regularly, they seem to be off on the right path. How can you guard those priorities in your household? Remember, it comes down to doing this: putting God first, putting your spouse second, putting your kids third. All other events, activities, sports, extracurricular stuff, vacation, travel, all those things, they're great things, but they belong at the bottom of your priority scale. Why? So we can keep God first. For Jared and Lexi, when they put God first, radical things happened. How will you fight for your family this week? Thanks for being a part of this series, CCV.